Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you all for your testimony. I caught most of Mr. Cannarsa's, and I'm sorry I missed yours. But I want to start with a few questions. Mr. Cannarsa, inspectors general play a key role in identifying and rooting out fraud across the federal government. As part of their efforts, they often encounter barriers when they try to work together across agencies and share data that could prevent fraud. For instance, an inspector general at one agency might not have the staff or time needed to access data on fraud that's stored at multiple other agencies. I know that your organization wants to establish some centralized data analytics capacity that the investigators could use to further detect and prevent fraud across the government. So this is a two-part question. One, what are some of the most promising examples of how inspectors general are already sharing data to prevent fraud, such as by working together to stop criminals who have multiple shell companies that have been defrauding our small business loan programs? So that just, why don't we start with that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And Senator Hassan, I wanted to thank you for working with Senator Joni Ernst on the IG Senate caucus.
Yeah.
We appreciate your efforts and look forward
Thank
to working
you.
with you both on that. To the question, several examples going back to the start of the pandemic, and want to give credit to the Small Business Administration OIG and Department of Labor OIG, who had oversight over the PPP and the EIDL programs, and then the Pandemic Unemployment Insurance Program, which obviously at that time it was a need for those funds to go out at the time,
Right.
but it left it ripe for fraud. And where the PRAC came in and helped was to identify a lot of those suspicious claims that were clustered, and which led
Right.
to, in those cases, groups that were putting in multiple claims, because they saw some go through, so they kept going
Right.
for them. In both instances, both SBA OIG and DOL OIG have successful fraud investigations to the tune of millions of dollars that were found, and prosecutions continued from there.
Great. And what can Congress do to make sure that sort of cooperation gets easier while also protecting people's privacy?
I think, as I mentioned, the expanding and enhancing the potential of the PRAC's pace. If we can do what they've shown in just the pandemic realm programs, if we can do that across federal programs, make it easier for, as you mentioned, for agencies and their OIGs to match in a central location, again, with all privacy protections and considerations in place, that just makes it easier to go to one stop instead of each agency trying to make these agreements one-off.
Right. And in my experience as a governor, one of the hard things is finding actual staff and resources to focus on this, so that if we can share in the effort, makes a big difference. Dr. Thomas, your position as the chief scientist of the Government Accountability Office gives you a good vantage point to see how the federal government deploys technology, especially when it comes to strengthening government effectiveness and saving taxpayer dollars. What are areas of the government that have the highest potential for reducing waste, fraud, and abuse through the deployment of cutting-edge technology, including AI?
Yeah, so if you look at our government-wide fraud report that we just put out, we talk about the different programs that there's a range that goes with it. So I think as earlier as mentioned, it's $500 billion. That's the high range. Those are for high-risk programs. Think about like COVID-style programs. The lower range is really analyzing the lower risk programs. We did a modeling exercise using Monte Carlo to understand what that range looks like. Essentially, what it comes down to, additional transparency, obviously within the payment systems, and making sure that the agencies are using the analytics and sharing the use of that analytics, as well as what has already been talked about earlier that we support, is setting up a center of excellence that supports the fraud world, so that across the government, all of these agencies can work together, can share data that matters, and share tools that identify those flags of potential fraud. The important part, though, that I want to make sure we don't miss is that the analysts play a critical role. The analytics only identifies a flag that something might be associated with fraud. It is the analysts themselves that actually goes and does the investigation.
Right, that's very helpful. I have lots more questions too, but why don't I yield back and then we can keep going.
Thank you, Senator.